Okay, so just a little review of my setup here. So I have the X32 rack. That is my audio interface for this computer, which is running JamKazam and Zoom. This interface here is actually plugged into the Linux computer that is doing OBS and broadcasting out to Facebook. Now, for this computer running JamKazam and Zoom, I'm using the HDMI output, and it's actually going into a HDMI video capture card, which I'm actually using to prop up this computer so I can get maximum airflow. Probably not the best of ideas, but it works. It comes out of there, USB 3.0, goes into a USB 3.0 adapter card that I had to buy because this computer did not have USB 3.0. So basically, this computer thinks that it has two monitors, although the second monitor is actually going into a video capture card. So on this computer here, this is actually the second display outputted from the HP. So this is actually coming from the video capture card. So that's why I can't do the cropping in OBS like what you could normally do. If I was running OBS on this computer, which was also running Zoom, I could do the cropping on the screen capture, and that would work out just fine. But since it's actually a video source coming into this computer, the only way that I could figure out to make it work was to actually, you can see this girl here is in the top left. So when I click scene top left, excuse me, it zooms in just on her. I have a black bar here and a black bar here just to clean it up so you only see her image. If I shut off this black bar, you can now see that's where the person on the right, from the original view, you can see this person here. That's where they would be. So that's why I use the black bars, just to try to make it as clean as possible and make it look like I'm doing something a lot fancier than what I'm really doing. So back to the audio portion. So this is actually being used by JamKazam as my audio source, and the reason I chose to use the X32 rack from my live rig instead of just buying another audio interface is because this has a lot more flexibility when it comes to routing options, which I really needed to have the flexibility in order to make this whole thing work. So basically, JamKazam, all the audio is coming through here. I actually pipe the audio out of this, out of the auxiliary outputs, and then those go into this audio interface here, which that audio interface is only connected to the broadcasting laptop. So it's just analog audio out of the X32 into this digital audio interface through USB into the broadcasting laptop, so that way I can get the audio from JamKazam into the broadcasting laptop. And so then it gets a little crazy because I add a lot of audio effects and stuff to try to clean up the audio to make it sound as professional as possible and to give it that room sound so that it sounds like you're actually at a club and not just the dry sound from JamKazam. I think it just adds a lot, and I've got a lot of compliments on it. So I actually route the sound from JamKazam. It actually comes in on, I believe it's auxiliary 5 and 6. No, it's auxiliary 1 and 2. There's a whole tutorial thing on YouTube on how to get the PC audio routed into auxiliary 1 and 2. So I'm not going to go into that on detail. But basically I bring it in here and then it runs just like a standard mixer. The A1 and A2, auxiliary 1 and 2 audio source from the computer now just runs out of the channels and it goes to the main left-right, which in the main left-right, I gotta scroll through this. So the main left-right comes in here. I add a very slight bit of equalization and roll off some of the really deep low end just to keep it from being too rumbly. Just a little bit of high end just to give us some sparkle. But then, since I have a whole bunch of effects in the effects rack built into this that I can tap into, I decided to do an insert, and I use the FX6, which I have set to a compressor, which is actually running in limiting mode instead of compression mode. So it runs as a limiter. Because, when you're doing audio and you're broadcasting, whether you're doing a commercial or broadcasting to TV or broadcasting to YouTube or wherever, you want a nice clean audio. You don't want it to be where people are talking and you can't hear them, and then they start playing music and now they're really loud. So you want to try to compress that dynamic range to keep it as consistent of a volume as possible for your viewers, so it doesn't get out of control. So from there, I send this signal actually out of the main left right, because this is an insert into main left right. So it comes out of main left right, and it actually feeds into what's called a matrix, which, if you know anything about audio, you can use matrices for all kinds of different stuff. So I'm not going to get really close into detail on that. But again, I use another insert on the matrix. Now the matrix is actually being fed out of that auxiliary 5 and 6 output, which goes into this, which then goes to OBS. So the reason I do this is because then I add this insert on the matrix, and in the library, or sorry, not library, but in the effects, I'm actually running it through a BBE sonic maximizer. Not a big fan of using those in live production. However, when you're doing broadcasting, it really helps to add some of the harmonics back to the low end, especially when going through the internet and having all this crazy compression and stuff going on. It just helps to breathe some life back into the sound. So I add a little bit of low contour, and the process is more like a high end. I don't know why they call it process and not high contour, because to me it seems more like a high contour rather than a process. But anyway, so I add that. The process gives it a little more sparkle on the high end. The low contour gives it a little more low end harmonics, so that it sounds a little heftier in the bottom end, and it doesn't just sound like cheap computer audio or whatever you want to call that. So basically it runs out of this, which goes in the matrix, and then comes out, goes into that. The other thing I do add, like I was saying, I add that room effects. And the way that I'm doing that is I actually have the auxiliary 1 and 2 feeding into my effects bus, which, if you know anything about mixers, that's a whole nother thing. So I run it into my FX1 bus, which when I go to my FX1, it is nothing more than a vintage room reverb. That is all that it is. And from one song to the next, I'll mess around with the reverb delay, the decay, the size, and the density. I'll mess around with these 4, just so that each song has a little bit different of a feel. Some songs, the original recordings, they had more of a very tight, a small room type sound to them. And I try to recreate that the best I can. I'm not obviously trying to make it sound exactly like the recording, because that's pretty much impossible to do unless you're actually in a studio and you have everything all separately tracked, which I don't have that here. All I have is one volume level coming from each individual person in JamKazam. So, we spend a lot of time, for like Scotty, for instance, he plays guitar and he's also singing. So we have to get his vocal and his guitar balanced on his side, so that when it gets to me, since I only have an overall volume control, I can't control anymore the mix between his vocal and his guitar. Before the last update on JamKazam, I used to have the master mix option, and I could go in and I could actually fix if his vocal was a little quieter than his guitar. I could pull the guitar down and pull his overall up, or I could pull his vocal up and then pull his overall down. So it gave me a lot of options, but JamKazam has since done a lot of updates, so it's kind of messed that up. So all that kind of happens. I hope that all makes sense for you. One last thing I do. I don't want to wear headphones during the whole entire thing. Even when I run live sound, being a musician and stuff, the beat gets to me and I really get into the music. So I like to dance and move around a bit because I'm just a knucklehead like that. So I actually pipe the audio back out of OBS and the broadcasting laptop. I pipe the audio back out, and then it just goes into this little mini mixer, which then goes to two of my DB Technologies monitors. I used to use my JBL Studio monitors, but currently that one is being a shelf for my secondary router, and the other one is just sitting over here collecting dust. So I might eventually put them back up on top of these. It'll be kind of close to my basement ceiling, but we'll see. We'll see what I do. Anyways, so I hope I explained the black bar thing and what that's all about. And so I hope that makes sense, and then hopefully this general overview on how this whole setup works makes sense. Reason I'm using two laptops, number one, it's just easier. Very, very easy, very quick setup. Not only that, but I don't have to worry about processing power. Each computer is doing its own thing. So if I have a problem with JamKazam, say I need to completely reboot the computer, I don't have to kill the live feed. I can keep the live feed rolling, and I can just put it into this standby, which just tells people, please stand by, we will be with you shortly, or whatever. And it's got some background music that plays just to keep people from getting too bored. So that's my setup. So if you have any other questions, you can feel free to ask away. But that's the gist of it. Cool. Thanks.